Welcome to Cutting Down the Nets. This is the bracket show. Unlike the gambling content we've provided this season, this one is going to focus strictly on the brackets. So let's jump right in. First of all, we actually have a tournament this year, which is super exciting because last year was a pit of despair. Let's start with the contenders and work our way to the bracket. The two likeliest teams to cut down the nets are Illinois and Gonzaga. When competing in bracket challenges, understand that almost everybody is going to choose Illinois or Gonzaga. So you have to decide if you have enough conviction here to go with one of these teams and beat the field elsewhere, or get contrarian at your champion spot. Contrarian options I see are these 6 teams. They're contrarian because they have flaws. But here's what I like about them. All 6 of these teams are well coached. All of these have good coaches. Kelvin Sampson for Houston, Nate Oates for Alabama. We have Dan Hurley at UConn, Muscle Man in Arkansas, Shaka Smart in Texas, and Lenny Hamilton for Florida State. What I like about UConn, Arkansas, Alabama is they have legitimate take over the game type of athletes. Book Knight for UConn, Moses Moody for Arkansas, and Alabama's got like 3 guys that could take over a game. Texas, Houston, Florida State are well balanced, good defensive teams, as well as extremely efficient offensive teams. Out of this bunch, Alabama probably intrigues me the most because of the amount of three-pointers they shoot. That's a high-variance approach that I like in tournaments. But a lot of these teams are in the same region, which makes things tricky. Let's talk underdogs. We have St. Bonaventure drawing LSU in the first round, and if they get past them, they would have a hobbled Michigan team who will be without arguably their best player. Georgetown comes in as one of the hottest teams. Ohio with a nice matchup against Virginia, led by Jay Preston, who is a guy that looks kind of weird, and you will definitely remember seeing him on TV this week. And then the Gauchos, Santa Barbara, take on Creighton. You're going to have some high-risk decision points. And what I mean by that is you have chances to take an extreme stand against the field in certain spots. I've highlighted some of those here, but when we open up the bracket, we'll be able to highlight those in detail. So let's get to our bracket simulation. What I do is I use adjusted offensive and defensive efficiencies. If you want more information on what that is and how that works, check out the pinned video on this YouTube channel. Each game I've simulated 10,000 times, and we'll kind of talk through large pool versus small pool strategies. If you are in a bracket contest with 1 million people, you must have a different strategy than one with 25 to 30 people at work. So let's dig in to our bracket. So you will see percents next to each team. That is the percent of the time that team won the game in those 10,000 simulations. So we'll start in our top left. We have Gonzaga versus Norfolk State. Out of 10,000 times, Gonzaga won 9,470 times, 94.7% of the time. I think it should be closer to 100, but that's why we simulate the games. So what I'd like you to do is get out your bracket. I'm going to talk through this briefly and highlight spots where I think you can take some chances, and then some spots where it's probably better to not take some chances. So Gonzaga, you're moving them on. Don't worry about that. That first round is a given. Oklahoma, Missouri. I have Missouri with the 55% chance of winning this game. I think it's an extremely low leverage spot to make a decision because neither team will beat Gonzaga, so there's not much to gain there. So feel free to choose whoever you want in that spot. Creighton with a 59% chance of beating UC Santa Barbara. So why did I mention UC Santa Barbara has a good chance of being a solid underdog? If you win 60% of the time, I probably have you favored by, somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 points, 5 to 7 points, somewhere in there. So if Santa Barbara is going to come within 5 to 7 points of Creighton, that is not much margin there for Creighton. Next up, Virginia only beating Ohio 54% of the time. I like Ohio here. In a large pool, I would advance Ohio. In a small pool, I would advance Ohio. I have this game within 1.5 points, and Virginia will be quarantining until the game basically tips. So they won't even arrive in Indianapolis until Thursday night, and they will have zero prep, zero practice, and not considering any of that, I liked Ohio. So now factoring all that in, and I am in on Ohio. Drake plays the play-in game against Wichita State. I do like Drake in that game. They draw USC, and I have USC advancing 65% of the time. So in this region, all the favorites held serve for the most part, but any place I see less than 60%, I would consider underdog territory. So if you want to take a chance on some underdogs, that would be the spot to do it. Ultimately, brackets are fun when it's your teams. You don't want to just pull up someone's bracket and be like, I'm going to submit this one. But I would pick my spots with maybe VCU over Oregon. Definitely Ohio over Virginia is one I'm going to play. And in some cases, maybe Santa Barbara over Creighton. One thing to consider when you're advancing teams is their cumulative probability. So for instance, Creighton here in the Sweet 16 has a 51% chance of beating Virginia or Ohio. So the odds of them getting to this spot are much lower than the odds of someone that's favored 90% of the time, 83% of the time, and so on. So you'll see that pop up in other spots. So overall, we're pretty much holding serve here in this region, and I do like Iowa to get to the Elite Eight for my Hawkeye fans, me included. Michigan is without their number one scorer. Livers is out with a stress fracture, and I think that significantly impacts Michigan. They did get tripped up in the Big Ten tournament because of that. So, how are we going to handle that situation? I have St. Bonaventure beating LSU, and then that's a toss-up with Michigan. So if you want a high-leverage, large pool strategy, I would consider St. Bonaventure over Michigan. I would not do that in a contest with 20 people because it's too much risk for that size of contest. I do like the 12 seed to actually win more often than the 5 seed here, Georgetown over Colorado. I would avoid any underdog talk against Florida State with UNC Greensboro. I actually have UCLA over Michigan State, and I don't think it matters as I think BYU is in a good spot against either one. Abilene Christian was a decent underdog team, but they drew Texas, and that is not the ideal matchup for their style of ball. I have Texas advancing there. And then UConn, this is a tricky one. So I mentioned Texas, UConn, Alabama, all as contrarian candidates to win it all. Here's the problem. 2 of them will meet in the second round if they win. And then the winner of that game will likely face Texas or BYU, which is no guarantee. So I like one of those teams getting out of there. I just don't know which one. And I think that's just what makes that part of the bracket hard. So I'm against Michigan here, but it's a tough call to see if you want to go the Alabama route to Texas or even potentially the UConn route. So overall, I ended up using the simulations. Alabama was our Final Four team. So the 2 seed Alabama, but all teams were in play there. Everyone from Florida State to Georgetown, St. Bonaventure, and UConn and Texas, as I mentioned. We talked about Gonzaga being a very popular title contender. Well, 94% chance of winning their first game, 83% chance of winning their second, 78% chance of winning the third, 59% of fourth. So overall, they just aren't running into these 52% games, 55% games, and that's what makes them so attractive in my mind. So I would have Gonzaga not only in the title game, but winning it all. Now, let's get over to the Baylor region. So Baylor, if this tournament started in mid to late January, I would have had Baylor better than Gonzaga and my team to cut down the nets. However, they went on a COVID pause where their team was shut down due to COVID concerns. When they returned, they have not been the same team. They've shown flashes of it, but overwhelmingly mediocre defensively, which is bizarre because they were elite defensively. And then you saw it in the Big 12 tournament. They struggled with K-State, one of the worst teams in that conference. And then they ultimately lost to Oklahoma State in a game that wasn't all that close. But here's a tricky part, and this is where I get into cumulative probabilities. North Carolina plays Wisconsin. I have North Carolina with a 58% chance of beating Wisconsin. However, if North Carolina beat Wisconsin, I give them an edge over Baylor. The problem is cumulative probability. North Carolina is 60% here, and then 55% here. So their chances of winning both are actually lower than Baylor winning both, even though I consider Baylor's odds of winning the second game less than North Carolina. It's just when you have that gimme at first, it just makes it so much easier to advance. So I would consider this a high-risk strategy to ride North Carolina because there's a 42% chance they don't even win a game. So yes, I would have them as slight favorites in each of the games they play up to the Final Four, but there is a tremendous amount of risk with playing a team that could lose opening round or the second round or the third. Okay, you're going to hear Winthrop's name a lot as a trendy underdog candidate. They're fun. They play really fast, one of the fastest teams in the country. They have a big point guard, which is pretty rare for a small school. It's a 6'7" point guard, so causes a lot of matchup problems in their conference. That will not cause Villanova problems. We do have contrasting styles as Villanova plays slow, and Villanova is at least down Colin Gillespie, one of their best shooters, and potentially down another starter, although it's likely he returns. I see Villanova being safe here, but you will hear Winthrop's name a lot as a trendy underdog. I also like Purdue's odds of moving on, and then you'll have a decision point here. I consider that a 50-50 game, Villanova and Purdue, and the winner of that would be in nearly a 50-50 game with either Baylor or North Carolina or Wisconsin. So that's what makes these brackets so hard is you have a coin flip here, a coin flip here, a coin flip here, a coin flip here, and that's why it's hard to run the table. Moving down this particular bracket, we have Texas Tech with some risk against Utah State. So knowing that I only have them winning 55% of their round one game, that's a team I would not like to move all the way to the Elite Eight against North Carolina, as you now have a chance of just blowing up that entire portion of your bracket. Now, if you're right, you'll probably get first, but that is a lot of risk. I mentioned Arkansas as a dark horse title contender. I see no problems in their first game. Should be close against Texas Tech, and a toss-up with Ohio State and or anyone from the top of that bracket. So this region I consider pretty wide open, just like the non-Gonzaga region that we covered so far. So ultimately, the simulations had 8 seed North Carolina in the Final Four. I, in a large contest, would be okay with that. In a smaller contest, I would keep Baylor beating North Carolina and play it a little straighter in that situation. Last region, we have Illinois. They will draw a very tough matchup with either Georgia Tech or Loyola Chicago. I have Georgia Tech beating Loyola Chicago in a very close game. I think both teams would have a chance of beating Michigan or Baylor, but not Illinois or Gonzaga. So just a seeding problem there, and it's very frustrating as I think both those teams had immense upside. And not only did they draw Illinois, but they drew each other in the first round. The committee can be so cruel. We talked about a 12-5 upset we don't like in Winthrop. Here's one that is a possibility to go along with Georgetown and Colorado is Tennessee, Oregon State. Oregon State out of the Pac-12, playing its best ball of the year as they won the Pac-12 title. Tennessee, extremely good defensively, does have troubles scoring at times. Oklahoma State, Liberty. You may hear a little buzz about Liberty. I am not going to go against Okie State here and would move them on to face Illinois in the Sweet 16. Syracuse, San Diego State. San Diego State I have advancing, but Syracuse plays a quirky defense that gives people troubles when they do not see it often. So they play this special type of zone that forces opponents into shots they don't normally take. And for whatever reason, no one can figure it out come tournament time. The people that can are the ones that play in their conference that see it year in, year out, and have plenty of experience against it. I still have San Diego State advancing there, but that is tremendous amount of risk against Syracuse in that spot. West Virginia, I see as an easy game against Moorhead, and then this was a 50-50 ball against San Diego State. So I'd be fine with West Virginia here without any issues, especially given the risk of San Diego State losing opening round. My model liked Clemson more than Rutgers here. My brain does not, so I'm kind of torn on that. I don't think it matters as Houston is a class above both of those teams. Houston's defense has slipped in the last month, which we'll have to find out if that's a trend or a mirage. I do have Houston winning there and Houston winning here. So I mentioned these high leverage decision points. I think you have one here. Illinois and Houston. If you have Gonzaga as a champion, you may want to go Houston here to differentiate your bracket and be a little bit more contrarian, or have Illinois go all the way and win. Other decision points were around what to do with these 2 1 seeds that have not looked like themselves in the recent future, and that's Baylor and Michigan. So overall, this bracket simulation had 2 1 seeds, an 8 seed, and a 2 seed, with the 2 best teams meeting for the championship. Again, in a small pool, I think you get away with those 2 teams in the finals. If you're playing in a larger pool, you're going to have to get everything else right to differentiate yourself. So this should help spot some potential upsets. Again, I like Ohio in this spot. I think Santa Barbara gives Creighton some issues. VCU has potential. I like St. Bonaventure for a game or 2. And by the way, if Ohio got past Virginia, they may play Santa Barbara, in which case I'd like Ohio, or they would play Creighton, which I think that game would be extremely close too. So I think Ohio could win 2 games potentially. So overall, that's what my thoughts are on this year's bracket. Please ignore that this says Atlanta 2020. I understand that. It's the only place I could find a fillable PDF. So please respect the hustle. And thanks for stopping by Cutting Down the Nets. We will have a lot of gambling content coming up before tip and before I head to Las Vegas. We will talk all things point spread, money line, and over-unders.